Hello, it's Dr. Courtney Alston of the Courting Happiness podcast. Have you checked out our happiness library? It's a carefully curated library with books that I highly recommend that are a must for your happiness library. Go to drcourtneyalston.com/happiness library. That's drkortneyalston.com/happiness library. The authors you will hear on the podcast can also be found in our happiness library. You can also purchase their books on our site. On top of that, your purchase also helps this podcast and the mission of courting happiness. Let's spread happiness and the word. Check out books on the Courting Happiness Library. It will not only change your life, but it can also help you with your next chapter too. Let's get back to the podcast. Welcome to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The courting and courting happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 67. I'm Dr. Courtney Alston. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy that you're here. So I have a confession. I live online. Who lives online? Anyone who's listening right now who lives online, raise your hand. My hand is up. Actually, correction, I have both of them up because I do. I love social media. I love checking out different posts and seeing what friends are up to. But I also love being able to see the great work of people that I admire, either what they're up to or what they're sharing in terms of either their latest research or books, or just sharing in terms of just wisdom. And so I was hanging out. I was, on Twitter, and which is so ironic because I saw this on Twitter, and then I saw the tweet on LinkedIn. So it was clearly screen grabbed and put on LinkedIn. And not only did I retweet it, I also at first screen grabbed it, then saw it on LinkedIn and saved it. And I saved it because I wanted to share it with you. And it is from a scholar that I greatly admire. His name is Dr. Adam Grant. He is an organizational psychologist. He's a professor at Wharton. He's the host of the Work Life podcast. And he is just incredible in terms of the work that he's done as it relates to workplace and as it relates to the value of really understanding meaningful work and what that looks like. So many great things that he shares that are so insightful in regards to culture and company culture. And so the reason why I saved the tweet, because I wanted to share it with you because it's so meaningful that I really believe this is something that this is really a comment that we should all really think very deeply on. So I'm going to actually read. So I'm going to quote him because I want to be able to really share the brilliance of his words. So this is what Dr. Grant says, quote, "A company isn't a family. Parents don't fire their kids for low performance or furlough them in hard times. A better vision for a workplace is a community, a place where people bond around shared values, feel valued as human beings, and have a voice in decisions that affect them." End quote. I feel like I need to pause. That is so powerful, right? A better vision for a workplace is a community, a place where people really are bonding in terms of shared values and having a voice in decisions that affect them. Well, we have an expert that will help you create a culture of community. Catherine Bell shows leaders how to use their heads and their hearts to enlighten a new and better way of working together. She is the founder and CEO of the Awaken Company and a best-selling author of the book that shares its name, The Awaken Company. Her revolutionary approach to business has been awarded the Nautilus Book Award in business and leadership. Catherine is well known as an expert in building sustainable cultures within organizations and strong values and purpose, as well as serving as a truly successful entrepreneur and business consultant. Catherine will ignite passion, purpose, and positive engagement. I have to say, I treasured every moment talking with Catherine. Her energy, warmth, and brilliance will inspire you. She truly inspired me. So let's dive in. Catherine Bell, thank you so much for being here today. I have been so excited about this conversation and being able to talk with you in regards to the work that you're doing. And the work that you're doing, Catherine, is just brilliant. It's brilliant. Thank you so much for all that you do in terms of really enlightening us in regards to the workplace and what we can do to really awaken the workplace. And so I'm so happy to have you here on the Courting Happiness podcast.
Dr. Courtney, it is such an honor and pleasure to be with you. And also, I look forward to playing with you. In fact, we already have been playing.
Yes, we have.
So I think that's like so important to bring that attitude of play.
Absolutely. So before Catherine and I got started, we were having continuous conversations. I couldn't stop talking with her, which I'm so excited to be able to share that, because to me, this is a wonderful sign of what's to come. This is just the beginning. And I'm so excited to be able to connect and to learn from you today, Catherine. So Catherine's book, The Awaken Company, really allows us to understand the value of creating a transformative workplace. For those who are listening, who are trying to really understand the value of being awakened, explain to us what an awakened company looks like.
So an awakened company feels like an alive forest. It feels vibrant, it feels moving, it feels ever changing, and it feels nurturing. It feels like a great holding space to kind of ripple out into the world, whatever product or service or offering that one may have. So if you can just visualize for a second, Dr. Courtney, just a drop going into the ocean. And when a drop goes into the ocean, it ripples out. So the Awaken Company, the fundamental model is we begin with that drop. We begin by awakening ourselves, by working on ourselves. And then we work on our relationships. And then we work on our teams, our organizations, and our world. So very much every single person listening to this, and you and I, we're all that drop in the ocean that is a catalyst for creating a more awakened world. Now, what is an awakening company? I prefer, the book is called The Awakened Company, but it's actually awakening because it never stops. Well, it does stop to pause and reflect, but it's reflective. It's not something static. It's not like you can say, oh, I'm awakened. That's ridiculous. No, we're all awakening together and we're interconnected. So what is an awakening organization? It's one that solves a problem, however, not to hurt other people, animals, or the planet. So it's really an organization that is solving problems. And, I think business has been cast with, been painted incorrectly, because I actually think entrepreneurs and businesses will solve the greatest problems of our time. So that's also the invitation for every business leader, that we're all the problem solvers. We're in code red. We've got major social issues that we need to heal and cure. And we're only going to do that by working together and in community. So to me, it's very hopeful. It's a very hopeful time, because I think as a result of the pandemic, we're all more alert and awake and aware of some of our challenges.
I love that in terms of what you just shared as it relates to community. And I had that visual when you're talking about that drop, right? And that ripple effect and kind of that wave, so to speak, that kind of just continues to kind of flow. But I love what you also shared in regards to the value of community. You mentioned and you discuss it within your book. What does community look like in the workplace? And how can we really benefit from having really what you call a community ship?
So what community looks like is that, number one, let's begin with those concentric circles so that everyone has a frame to work with. Number one is individually. What's been shown, Courtney, is the more self-aware we are as leaders, the higher performing we are. So number one, we're working on ourselves. And we're not just working on ourselves for business. We're not just the next project. We're working on our humanity. We need to bring humanity back into our workplaces, our souls back into workplaces. So how do we create self-awareness? We do it through things like learning the Enneagram, meditation, knowing the awake, asleep line. Am I behaving from my awakened place, or am I behaving from more of my asleep place? And then once we kind of have that as a solid ground, awakening ourselves, then let's go to the next layer, awaken our relationships. And our relationships in business, we get so caught up in role. And I think it's time for role to go away. It's more about, how are we related? How are we really connected? Are our hearts engaged with each other? Are our minds engaged with each other? And are we also honoring our autonomy, like taking responsibility for our own kind of boundaries? We need that as well. So those three pillars of kind of the relatedness, and relatedness is the glue of corporate culture. And what the Awaken Company does is we help to create strategies with souls for organizations around corporate culture. So it's like, how do we create that strong glue between individuals where we're bringing our whole selves to work? And then if you look at the next ring, which is the Awaken organization or community, it's seeing all of our interrelationships, not only with those at work, but also those outside of our organization, of the planet. How are we working? Are we producing things that are helpful for the planet? And how do we create awakened organizations or strategy with soul? Is first, we need to be energized. And you know what, actually, Dr. Courtney, this is really, really important. Let me begin with this. Often people say you need to begin with why. And I actually think we need to challenge that assumption now. Dr. Courtney, I think we have to begin with who.
Ooh.
So who am I to help actualize the why? So who do I have to be to kind of come up with, to be part of enabling that vision of an organization? So I think we all have to take ultimate responsibility for who we are. So energizing, sustaining, and regenerating, and building those all into our community ship. And also realizing our interdependence. Like, I'm sitting on a chair. This chair was made by amazing human beings. Your books, those books, are holding space in your office, in your world, in your mind, and your art. Choose happy. Those are all interrelated. So it's also paying attention to our atmospheres at work. What kind of energy are we kind of giving and receiving? and dancing with that all, so that we create something more alive and vibrant. Like our rate of loneliness in North America has gone way up. And I think it's because we aren't seeing our interdependence and how much everything we are is related to the other. I would not know me for if I did not know you.
Absolutely. I love that. It's so compassionate yet nurturing, yet really humanizes all of us in terms of understanding how connected we are. And I love that you shared the who, because we do talk a lot about the why, right? The why in the organization, but the who really does humanize us. And it's interesting that you say that, because part of my area of research in positive psychology is meaningful work. And meaningful work scholars really pose this question of, who am I? And within terms of that journey, you get an understanding as it relates to maybe what your core values are, what's meaningful to you, what connects you. And so what I love so much is what you're sharing. It goes back to looking at levels of self, because I think when we're talking about business, we can easily get caught up in terms of maybe the bottom line, right? But really, the value is of the people.
Exactly. So, and what business research actually shows us is the alchemical formula is there's 2/3 focused on corporate culture and 1/3 on financial results. And so often I'll meet with CEOs and they won't know even what their vision is. So I think we've got it's fun, a fundamental time to know what our vision is, but also to know what our inner compass is. So, like, who are we and how are we going to show up in the world to enable a better vision, a stronger vision? For example, the vision of the Awaken company is to ignite and sustain the fire within. And our values are passion, purposefulness, and playfulness. And so everything we do is aimed at that. However, when I'm in organizations, and I'm meaning significant organizations, often the vision is not clear and it's not enabled. So it's just really more lip service than it is actualized. So I think there's an invitation for business leaders, because it's actually, they'll be more financially successful when we do this.
It's interesting. One of the things that I love so much about your book, Catherine, I have a lot of notes. Because I love so many elements of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many different notes, because I was like, oh, this is such a great statement or quote or, philosophy. And when we're talking about mission, right, we're talking about the core values, the philosophy, what's really driving the organization. And what I love so much is this. Not even sure where to begin, but I'm going to start with this one. It says, and this is what Catherine has said in her book, again, The Awakened Company. It is a must read for any manager that's listening. This is a must read. And if you're a business student, I am telling you, this is also another must read. And if you happen to be like me, a professor, this is certainly a must read and include within your curriculum, because it is really profound. So this is what Catherine says. She says, once we really wake up, really grasp the interdependent nature of life, we realize that a company must exist to serve our interconnectedness as much as it exists to make a profit. That interconnectedness is so vital in regards to us really showing the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, how really aligned we are or connected, that in terms of our existence. How do we go about truly connecting even more in the workplace?
Here's a simple one, Dr. Courtney, and it's based on quantum physics. Just observe. Just observe.
Wow.
Like, so for example, in sitting back and observing, it changes the whole field. And yet in business school, we're often, I'm an MBA, and we're often taught, and I teach in MBA schools and been a fellow at a university, we're often taught to do, but there's a lot of power, and it actually changes mathematically the whole field when we just observe. when we're just there. The other thing, Dr. Courtney, that we need to really talk about is engagement. So, engagement's quite low, and but what can we do to actually change engagement is to positively notice another person. So observe and just to positively mirror. The most engaged people are those who are positively noticed. The least engaged people are those who are not noticed at all. And those in the middle are those who are negatively noticed. Even those negatively noticed are higher than those who are not noticed at all. So how do we do that? We notice our teammates doing the right things. And then that creates a flywheel, a positive flywheel to create from there. And also people tend to want to repeat what they've done well. So they'll keep doing it. So the invitation would be, one, sit back, relax, observe. It sounds very counterintuitive in business, but I'd really recommend it. Number two would be to positively notice your teammates. And number three, and I don't think we do this enough. I don't think this is done enough in organizations, because often there's the big town halls and, but our relationship with our immediate supervisors, a huge catalyst, is just spend a lot of time one-on-one. So one-on-one connecting, and I mean really connecting, not just about kind of what's the next goal, about how are you as a human, going for a walk with that person and really deeply connecting with them. And that creates a form of relatedness, as we were talking about earlier, that's far stronger than just talking about what the next goal is. And, the research says, for everybody who leaves, whose salary is about $100,000, it is the cost when a person leaves is $1.2 million. So we can't underestimate the cost of turnover. When turnover is there's wanted and unwanted turnover. I'm an empiricist like you, like I love research. And yes. So we do want some wanted turnover, but the unwanted turnover is often very preventable.
Absolutely. I love what you're talking about in terms of the value of really thinking about how you're going to retain the members of your team. And I think a big part of that retention, right, is being able to make sure that they feel seen in terms of their work. And that engagement that you discuss is so vital in terms of that, because if you're working with individuals or you're having a meeting and you're coming together and you tend to notice or acknowledge the same people over and over again, opposed to really making sure that there's a level of inclusion within your organization, right? That can really cause a lot of negative dynamics within the organization itself. So I love so much that you're talking about the value of engagement and making sure that really the leader, the manager, is valuing the team on a whole. How would you what would you really recommend as it relates to a leader really being more inclusive in regards to their levels of engagement?
So inclusivity is hugely important, and it's hugely important to the Awaken company for a whole bunch of reasons. Number one is obviously bringing the whole of humanity into our work and into our organizations. And also it makes business sense. People, there's actually a mathematical equation. Ernst & Young produced this research, Groundbreakers. And the more inclusive we are, the higher performing we are. The more we include different people at the table, the more powerful we are. So any organization, for example, I've often been the only woman in the boardroom, and I'm tired of it. I am very tired of it. I would prefer to work with a more inclusive group. So how do you do it? Well, you actively make it one of your metrics in terms of your strategy with soul. So with the strategy with soul, when somebody sent me a note, oh my goodness, this is so enlightening working with you, because we're measuring things we would never measure before. I also believe where it gets measured gets managed. So I think we need to have clear inclusivity aims and clear aims around building healthy corporate cultures. And it's not like the financial. The financial is one aspect. So I said 1/3 focus on financial, 2/3 on cultural metrics. But the cultural metrics need to be very specific to your organization. It's more mercurial. So I almost call the cultural the divine feminine, and the financial the divine masculine. We need both. We need both. But in terms of the cultural metrics, hiring people who are empowered with your vision, with your values, and then creating all metrics around that, creating clear inclusivity goals in your strategy with souls. So because I think we need to put the attention there, because people will say, oh, well, they don't have enough operation experience or whatever. Well, I'm sorry, but if they're going to be a fit, you hire them. Like, I just think, because there's so many systemic borders that we need to kind of rip them apart, tear them apart, so that we can create this beautiful rainbow, this beautiful circle of organizations that are flourishing. Because a healthy ecosystem in a forest is not composed of just pine trees. Julian Barling, who's a researcher at Queen, said, the typical leader is tall, pale, and male. Like, if you look at the research, we can't have just pine trees in our forest for it to be healthy. We need moss. We need ferns. We need butterflies. So it's like, how do we create that healthy, vibrant forest? And then putting those metrics into your strategy with soul. And one of the things we did at Blue Era, so that's the Profit 200 company that I founded. There's a Profit 10 in my province. Is we created stillness breaks to create this whole how do we pause? So anyone at any time could create a stillness break. So that was part of our strategy, is stillness. So, get creative, get alive, and feel the forest. Just go for a walk in the forest, and you'll feel different things that are needed.
I really love that you are really giving us permission to be still, and what that can do for us. This incredible mindful approach in regards to stillness. And I think sometimes people may not see the value in that because of it's just mindfulness. But it's not. Look, it is mindfulness. It is important. It is vital. There is a return. And I think what I love so much about your work is that you're telling us the value of having that level of stillness, so you can be proactive and begin to really observe and really be able to think, and even think more innovatively. There's great research as it relates to compassion in the workplace, and how compassionate organizations are more productive and innovative. And what I love so much about the work that you are sharing with us, and the work that you really are just in terms of leading, Catherine, in regards to really allowing us to understand the value of awakening, right, is the value of the importance of that stillness and what it can mean, and how it can really serve us. So for those who are listening, who are saying, okay, well, how do I even begin? Where do we even get started, in regards to trying to adopt some of these approaches, or maybe just one for this quarter, right? What is your recommendation in regards to really kind of getting them started, and then what that can possibly look like for their organization?
Well, Dr. Courtney, so I'm also involved with something called the Center for the Purpose of the Corporation. And we begin every meeting like this. So you and I are going to do a practice right now.
I love it.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like you to either keep your eyes open or closed, whatever feels most comfortable for you. For me, I keep my eyes closed because I'm assertive. So my energy kind of goes out a lot. And this is an opportunity to come back to myself. So next, what I'd like you to do is I'd just like you to feel your right arm. So everybody listening, I'd like you to feel your right arm. Next, I'd like you to feel your right leg. Feel your right leg. Bring your awareness to your right leg. Notice how feeling and awareness, there's a subtle difference between them. Next, bring your awareness to your left leg. Bring your awareness to your left leg. Now, bring your awareness to your left arm. Bring your awareness to your left arm. Now, let your awareness cascade through your entire body. So let your awareness start with your head, down through your neck, shoulders, arms, back and front torso, both of your legs, and your feet. And then, with this centered awareness, we will carry on our conversation.
That was, I am so speechless because I am so much more relaxed. I was already there anyway, talking to you, Catherine, because we had just hit it off right off the bat, right? So I'm like, oh my God, so very excited. But that in itself, I almost have a tear in my eye because it was just so centering. And I know, and for anyone who's listening, who was with us while we were literally, while Catherine was walking us through this incredible transformative exercise, I highly recommend closing your eyes. If you're, especially if you're an individual who I will admit, here I am a happiness scholar, but I will admit this, I can be a busy bee and I can look around and think about all that I need to do. Right. Or, oh my gosh, I need to pick this up as soon as I finish interviewing Catherine. Or, oh, I need to do this next before my next interview. Or I need to make sure I get done with this today. But closing my eyes, giving myself permission to be still for that moment was so transformative that I literally felt lifted doing it. And so for those of you who are listening, who are maybe driving and couldn't do that, because we wouldn't recommend you do it while driving, but
No,
Catherine is
not while driving, not while driving. Please don't, or doing anything mechanical in nature.
Nothing mechanical, but
No.
come back, make sure you come back to the podcast and to really give yourself that time to allow Catherine to walk you through it. Because honestly, Catherine, I feel lifted. Is this something that's very common in terms of the response rate that you get when you're working with different individuals and organizations?
So we do this at the beginning of every meeting with these thought leaders in the world to recenter it. And, Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our opportunity to make a choice. So what does that do? It creates space for us to kind of leave the past, wherever we were in our previous meetings, is to center and ground. So we do it with all of our clients. Our clients have active practices. And at first, CEOs will be like, I don't have time for this. And then we're like, you don't have time for 10 minutes. And it will literally change your world. It rewires the circuits in our brains. It helps us to reduce stress. We're able to make more conscious choice as a result because of that pause and because we're training the pause. It is actually an act of activism to pause in our world. And in many ways, human beings are kind of like a virus on the planet. And this it reduces the heat. It reduces the heat. What it does is it brings us back to be here. And we will never get our moments back. And I don't know about you, Dr. Courtney, but I want to be in as many moments as I can be during my life. Absolutely. And so this invitation brings us back to being, and then being together, and then adding that dose of humanity into our organizations, where often it's just like strive. No, pause. And then when coming from that place, and if you look at business leaders, a lot of them have these practices. So the invitation is to incorporate them into our beingness, to make a conscious practice of just being in the world. And then our happiness will go up, our joy will go up, our engagement goes up by being here.
I love that. And I love that you're talking about what that may look like in terms of the individual, in terms of the manager itself, because I often, when I'm training executives and managers, I often share the value of everything starting with self. So you start with self to be able to empower your organization. You start with that level of even self-compassion to be able to be compassionate towards your organization and to have an empathetic approach to leadership. And what I love so much of what you're sharing is the value of understanding that mindfulness approach for yourself, which I think we often talk about, but I'm loving the fact that now we're talking more about what that looks like as relates to an organization, and what that can do in terms of really serving the organization. And another thing I wanted to mention is what Catherine had written in her book, and which talks about the value. And I say this because I know some people that will say, you said earlier, I don't have time for this, or what is it even going to mean? But what I love so much of what you shared is that this comes from Catherine's book. She says, when a community functions as a true community, the result is greater than the sum of its parts. I value that, because we as mentioned earlier, we could be so caught up in this dynamic of the bottom line, right? But the value is thinking about these mindful approaches that are really going to serve in terms of really kind of literally awakening the company itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's so interesting about what you just said, Dr. Courtney, is the worst performing organizations that are those that just focus on financial results. And the majority of businesses don't survive past 10 years. So I think we have the empirical evidence to know we need another way of being and doing in the workplace. And according to the research, and this is business research, it's bringing the whole notion of corporate culture and well-being and humanity back into our organizations. And it's not rocket science. It's what are the small things we are doing every day to bring joy into our worlds, to being joyful together, to creating something far more powerful, a bigger wave together than we would if we were apart. It's just, and it feels sometimes counterintuitive, this whole pause thing. And it works. So take the pauses, create time to actually spend time with people and build strategies, corporate strategies. And I'm looking for, maybe you can help me with this one, but I'm looking for another word, Dr. Courtney, instead of strategies, because strategies based in the word, it's a militaristic term. Strategy is a militaristic term. I think we need a new word for it, because I know people for example, in my industry, I want them to do well, because then they'll up the bar for everybody. And so, for example, when I play tennis, I want to play tennis against people who are better than me, because I become better by, I improve. So it's like cooperation. Like, how do we create that frame? And it's not a strategic. Strategy is the wrong word. And I haven't identified the word yet. But, we need to create different plans than
or
ones that are just out to beat.
Or maybe it's just having a different approach or mindset in regards to that. So instead of, the thing is, the MBA in me loves strategy.
Of
but
course, of course.
but the happiness scholar in me goes, I can see, in terms of, really kind of opening up strategy and making it really much more, I don't want to say tangible, but almost a little bit more welcoming in regards to the whole process. And so I love what you're sharing in regards to kind of like not completely divorcing strategy, but thinking about how it can be reworded so it's really bringing this more connected approach to us all.
That exactly. So I still think I don't want to throw out strategy. I am an MBA and I do teach at an MBA school. So we can throw it out, but it's more like the actual like meaning behind strategy. And I think, this open, inclusive, holding, community, holistic, awakening field that I just really would like us all to invite into the business world, because I think business leaders are going to change the world. So let's change the world in a more awakened fashion.
I love it. I hate that we're out of time, because I could talk to Catherine all day. I know she's looking at me and I'm looking at her. I'm like, I know. This is what I wasn't looking forward to, because I just enjoy every second in terms of talking with you, Catherine. But before we do, I have a question that I ask everyone that's on the Courting Happiness podcast. And because Courting Happiness is all about really committing to one's well-being, committing to your happiness journey in terms of whatever that looks like. And so here you are in terms of the work that you're doing, helping awaken companies, right? Tell us what you do to commit to your happiness journey or your well-being.
Great question. And what I'm committed to is, number one, is I have an aim for my life. So I'm here to be a universal muse, to radiate love, wisdom, and power, to serve humanity and the planet. And I think we've divorced our spiritual practices and into our worlds. And ultimately, I think our spiritual practices are an invitation to really be in the world and be in our work. And so I have a devoted spiritual practice, and I would like everybody to kind of reconnect to whatever. It doesn't matter what type of spiritual practice it is. I'm very open. In fact, I'm Buddhist, so I'm not attached to it, but to cultivate who we are, to cultivate our spirit, our souls, our mind stream, whatever it is you may believe in. And my practice is I have a Vajrayana Buddhist practice that's led by a female, Lama Alioni and Charlotte Rotterdam. We actually did a whole series on compassionate leadership together. And I just really would love to just invite everybody to spend time as the foundation, spiritual practice, whatever that may be, prayer, meditation, doesn't matter. But really, that's my invitation. And that keeps me well, because it kind of always has my back.
I love it. I love it. I love that what you said in terms of it always has your back, right? It's there. It's and how it serves, protects, and honors. I love that in terms of having your back. I think of all those things when I think of something having our back or having your back. I love that. I also, before we close, where can we find you, Catherine? Where can our Courting Happiness audience find you online? Where does Catherine live online?
Catherine lives online, awakencompany.com, obviously, and sign up for our newsletter. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And so you can follow the Awaken Company on all of those social media mediums. And we really, our aim is to provide inspiration. So everything we do around those social media places are to kind of spark you to help create a more awakened world for everybody.
Thank you so much for creating an awakened world for us today. Honestly, every element, every message, every bit of strategy and approach.
Yes. I like both.
Yes, was so transformative. Catherine, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Dr. Courtney, you're amazing. And thank you so much for having me. And you're very inspiring. So you make people like you make me keep on wanting to work. So thank you so much for being you. And I just have to say, she's absolutely gorgeous on the inside and outside. And on a Saturday, you should see her. Amazing. Amazing.
Well, back at your beautiful. You are drop dead gorgeous and brilliant. And I'm so grateful to have had this time to connect with you today. Catherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, and come play with the Awaken Company.
Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drcourtneyalston.com. That's podcast@drkourtneyalston.com. Join us on Instagram at Courting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Courting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.